Hey guys, BlockbyBlock here. So, a while back, some major news came out, which I think has really gone under the radar and is even more bullish than the strategic Bitcoin reserve of the United States. And that was that the finance minister of Russia confirmed that Russia was using Bitcoin to get around US sanctions after Russia went to war with Ukraine. Now, I'm going to talk in this video about why this is just the beginning and other countries are going to follow suit. I'm going to explain why that is through a historical lens, a historical context. And next, I'm going to explain why they chose Bitcoin and why every other country is going to inevitably choose Bitcoin. So to give you the historical context and what exactly these sanctions are and how does the US have so much influence so they can just cut countries off the global market? Well, the US dollar is a global reserve currency. This started in 1944 after the war. Countries were devastated. So in the Bretton Woods Agreement, they decided to make the US dollar a world reserve currency backed by gold. That was until 1971, where Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, and now countries are questioning, what's backing the US dollar? And so the US needs to continue this global demand for the US dollar to reserve its status as a global reserve currency. So in 1974, they signed the US-Saudi oil agreement, where basically, if you want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, you've got to buy it in US dollars. So now countries have to hold US dollars. And this was a way to pretty much perpetuate the demand for US dollars globally, but it wasn't done in a free market sense where the market decided that the US dollar was best and to use it. It was more coercion, and then it became a self-fulfilling prophecy where, because the US was using these coercive techniques to hold the dollar as a global reserve currency, that made the dollar more stable in comparison to other currencies. So countries, of course, were incentivized to continue using it. So eventually, this led to some problems, and one was that basically, since all countries were trading in US dollars, so just to give you an example, let's say Canada and Britain make a global trade, and Canada sends Britain some lumber. Britain doesn't send them back pounds. What happens is, the vast majority of the time, is you have correspondent US banks that both Canada and Britain hold in the United States, and those correspondent US banks settle in US dollars, and this makes the process much more efficient because countries don't want to be having to take the native currency of another country every time they trade globally. It's much easier, it's much more economically efficient to just use the global reserve currency, which is the US dollar right now, which has the highest liquidity, and it's backed by one of the strongest economies and strongest military powers in the world. The problem with this is it gives the US a lot of leverage where they can basically sanction countries that don't do what they want and kick them off the global market. So how do they do this with Russia? Well, with Russia, they basically sanctioned Russia from something called SWIFT, which is a financial messaging network, which the US has pretty much complete influence over. And they also seized $300 billion worth of Russian assets and offshore bank accounts. So this is a big problem because now countries, they have to even go against their own incentives to do what the US wants, even if what the US wants is in conflict with their own interests. And you saw in 2000, Iraq wanted to start selling oil in euros because of this reliance on US dollars, and that didn't end too well for Saddam Hussein, and the same thing happened to Muammar Gaddafi. It's just a crazy coincidence, though, of course. But these countries, they never had a tool to circumvent this problem, this US global bullying through their monopoly on the global reserve currency, which they pretty much enforce through coercion. So countries have tried to get out of this stronghold, and one thing they tried to do was the BRICS currency. So the BRICS nations got together and they wanted to make a BRICS currency, but it's never come to fruition. And guys, the reason it doesn't come to fruition is because who gets to decide the monetary policy of the BRICS currency? A lot of BRICS nations are actually rivals. For example, China and India. And a lot of smaller BRICS nations, they're worried that if there is a BRICS currency, will they even have any say in it? Will they have any say in the monetary policy and how it affects them? How do they know that they're not going to get the short end of the deal, and the larger nations in the BRICS currency aren't going to influence the money in their favor the same way the US has? How do they know they're not just going to run into the US dollar 2.0 pretty much? So the BRICS currency has never taken off. It's always been just a concept, and there's been talk about it. So what options do these nations have to get around this? Well, here's how I look at it. There was three options, right? One was the BRICS currency. Doesn't work for the aforementioned reasons. Second is gold. Gold is too slow in a modern digital economy. We can't be shipping gold to each other. It's just way too expensive, slow, and difficult to secure. You risk it getting stolen along the way. You got to assay it when it gets there. It just doesn't work. third is cryptocurrencies. Now, cryptocurrencies are very promising. But why is it that out of these cryptocurrencies, so we've already eliminated the two other options, but why is it out of these cryptocurrencies that Russia decided to use Bitcoin? Well, the reason Russia decided to use Bitcoin is it's the most secure, decentralized cryptocurrency, and it has the highest liquidity. So why don't they use Ethereum? Now, Ethereum is not completely centralized. I know it's not completely centralized. Don't crucify me in the comments. However, it's much more centralized than Bitcoin is. And I'll give you an example if you want to argue. 2016, what happened with the DAO hack? In 2016, when the DAO hack happened with Ethereum, they rolled back the blockchain. What does that mean? They basically reversed everybody's transactions to before the hack happened. And who got to decide this? Well, Vitalik was pretty much the voice that led this. And this is a problem with having a leader and having a foundation, is it leads to this centralization where even if most people don't agree with this, they believe in immutability and that money should be immutable and that transactions should achieve final settlement, which is very, very important if you want to be a global neutral form of money like gold. You can't have a leader that has all this influence over the developers and influence over the exchanges that the chain can get rolled back. And CZ tried this with Bitcoin when there was a Bitcoin hack, and it didn't fly. And he even tweeted and he said that, yeah, Bitcoin is too decentralized. There's no chance that Bitcoiners will ever agree to roll back the chain. Bitcoin nodes are also a lot more decentralized than Ethereum because Ethereum has much larger. It takes a lot more data to run a full Ethereum node. And also to be an independent solo Ethereum validator in the proof of stake protocol, you need to put up something like, 32 Ethereum. So it's kind of like you got to be rich to play. Whereas anybody can solo mine Bitcoin for the sake of decentralization, even if they're not profitable. Anybody can run a full Bitcoin node. It's not that expensive. You just need to get an SSD card with something like 2 terabytes. For these reasons, Bitcoin is much more decentralized and secure, and it has actual final settlement. It's the Bitcoin, every hard fork it's had, Bitcoin has always stayed with the original chain. Every fork has been a soft fork that's backwards compatible. You can't say that with Ethereum. Ethereum has hard forked many times and they've jumped ship to the next chain. For example, when Ethereum switched from proof of work to proof of stake. Also, many Ethereum blocks are OFAC compliant, which means that they censor transactions. A very significant portion of Ethereum blocks are OFAC compliant. So that's the reason, that's one reason that Russia is using Bitcoin. And that's another reason why North Korea, when they stole all that Ethereum, traded it into Bitcoin, is because they understand this too, because they're probably thinking, oh shoot, what if this is the DAO hack 2.0 where they roll back the chain again? We better convert this to Bitcoin because that doesn't get rolled back, And that's why they say all these other cryptos are securities and Bitcoin is a commodity. So that's one reason. The second reason is there are cryptocurrencies that are decentralized. I'm not going to say that. There's Monero. I think Monero is pretty decentralized, especially in terms of its CPU mining, and although we can argue about the flexible block size eventually leading to getting more difficult for people to run full nodes. But right now, Monero is, you could say, decentralized. But the problem is these cryptocurrencies, they have much smaller market caps. So they don't have the liquidity to deal with these global transactions that are happening in the hundreds of millions, if not billions. Only Bitcoin can manage that. Bitcoin has enough liquidity where you can actually make those transactions. You can even go buy billions of dollars of Bitcoin and the price does not move that significantly. You've seen that with Saylor. When he's bought billions of dollars of Bitcoin, the price doesn't move. That's because just the massive amount of liquidity Bitcoin has. And the more the market cap goes up, the more liquidity it gets and the more attractive it actually becomes. Whereas some people might think diminishing gains, it's like, no, it actually becomes more likely to become the next global reserve currency, you could say. So what's happening here is, as Russia uses Bitcoin to circumvent these sanctions, now all these other nations that have been under the thumb of the US, they have the same tool, and they haven't had this tool before, and they're just starting to notice. Because if Russia is using Bitcoin to get around trade sanctions, that means that they're giving that Bitcoin to somebody else. That means that there's already countries that are starting to participate in this, and the dominoes of US dollar dominance are beginning to fall, and we are moving towards a Bitcoin standard before our eyes. And that's why I really think that Bitcoin is going to break all models to the upside. Because if the US dollar loses its status as the global reserve currency, Bitcoin's price is just going to do a step change. Because what's going to take its place? what's going to take its place? It can't be gold. Gold is way too slow for a modern digital economy. It can't be these other altcoins for the aforementioned reasons. It's going to be Bitcoin. And it's not going to be stable coins. I know some of you might be thinking, wait, why don't countries use stable coins? Well, USD stable coins have built-in blacklist functions. Tether has built-in blacklist functions. Much worse than Ethereum. Much worse. Like Tether, they'll just go and they'll just freeze an account. And you saw this with a previous hack that happened where somebody stole some Tether and they just froze the hacker's account. And I'm guessing, that's why, if they had been smart, they should have sold that Tether for some Bitcoin, because the Bitcoin doesn't run into this problem. So the world has to converge on global neutral money, not a security, not gold, not silver. It's going to be a digital commodity. And the only digital commodity we have is Bitcoin. It's inevitable. Once these dominoes fall, well, they keep going. And the US sees this, and that's why they're trying to now jump on ship, because they know that they're going to get left behind. Because when the Bitcoin standard comes, they can't even print dollars to buy Bitcoin because the dollars are worthless. The only way to survive is to get in a position now and accumulate a lot of Bitcoin now. And I'm going to make a later video on how I think the US is going to accumulate Bitcoin. That'll be coming up next. It's going to talk about bit bonds. But basically, yeah, guys, we're seeing hyper Bitcoinization before our very eyes. And when it happens, it's going to be a step change. It's going to, no matter, even if you're like the biggest Bitcoin bull, it's going to be beyond your expectations how fast we rip up, how fast that step change comes. So, yeah, I hope this video was informative, and I will see you guys next time. Let me know if you have any questions and how you found the video, and please subscribe, like, comment, and share. And this has been BlockbyBlock. Thanks for watching.